Conversations with the Mind podcast, where we explore consciousness through conversations with interesting people. Our mission is to engage the collective mind piece by piece to bring greater clarity of mind to our listeners locally and across the planet, and to contribute to broaden the shared experiential knowledge and wisdom of existence. What's up, YouTube? Hello, friends, and welcome back to Conversations with the Mind. I'm your host, Shane Lamaster. Thank you for joining us today. We are here for episode number 87 with very, very special guest, Melanie Jimenez. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for being here. I don't usually record podcasts in the morning, so I think it's going to be good because my energy is just starting to wake up in my body. So we'll see how my brain is functioning today. Okay, so first question is the same question I ask everybody. And that is, so the show's name is Conversations with the Mind. And I'm wondering, what does that mean to you when you hear that phrase? How does it land with you? What sort of images come up? Conversations with the Mind. What does that mean?
So the thing that I would think of first is just all the different voices in my head. Just using them to kind of figure out where I'm at and having a conversation. If I'm trying to figure out what to do in a situation, I'll use all these different voices that have different roles, and have them kind of talk to each other, figure out what the best option is. Or if one of my voices is going crazy, I'll use the counselor voice or a different voice to talk it down. So that's pretty much the first thing that comes to mind. Also journaling, meditation,
Nice.
All that stuff.
Yeah, journaling and meditation are certainly good ways to engage with that piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those different voices. I'm curious to hear more about you said so sometimes here, at least here in American culture, which is so stupid, we say I have all these voices in my head, and if you say that out in public, someone's like, oh my god, this person is crazy.
Right.
But we all have these different voices, whether we identify them as separate from ourselves or not. I have a couple clients who are schizophrenic, so they literally think that these voices are other entities outside of themselves. They're projecting things into their mind. So can you talk a little bit more about when you said you have many voices and they play different roles?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, they're all just me, different aspects of me. For example, when I was weightlifting a few years ago, I would have this voice in my head that was really strict. And so it wouldn't let me quit, it wouldn't let me go easy. Anytime I wanted to give up, it'd be no, do 5 more. And it would just be pushing me. And that one's kind of relaxed a little bit. It's giving me a little more grace.
No, that's all good. My brain goes blank too. So we're talking about voices, and I have that voice too. I think it was a lot stronger in my head in my teens and 20s, and I don't know where that came from. I assume that it came from my conditioning into Western masculinity, and being taught what it meant to be a man and to never quit and things like that. And I was raised by a single mom, and so it's kind of interesting that I was still conditioned that way, and I'm still trying to break that down. So that particular voice in your head that tells you to just keep going, to push it, that can be some people would call it perfectionistic self, right? The one that always wants better for you. Sometimes you can get in trouble with that voice, right?
Yes. Oh my goodness. In the past, I felt like it was almost unforgiving, in the sense it was almost punishing me for not being perfect. Since that's changed, since I've grown and I've healed to some extent, it's just gotten, in the past it was keep pushing because you're not perfect and you have to be better, and now it's keep pushing because you deserve to be better, and it's okay where you're at now, But yeah,
That's that grace
it's
piece.
changed. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that voice is still there, like pushing, which is, I mean, I think it's such a healthy voice. I wonder,
Hmm.
I bet there's people out there that just lack that voice,
Yeah,
you know?
just
that-
lack discipline
Um,
in a way.
well, there's certainly people that lack discipline, but I think there's probably people out there who have that, or who maybe don't have that voice that says, keep pushing to be better,
Hmm.
but instead they have a voice that says, like, no, you don't need to be any better than you are, like,
Yeah, you're not worth it.
yeah, that's a
Yeah.
whole different role, right? A whole different voice. Oh man,
Hmm.
we can go down a rabbit hole
Oh my
with that
gosh,
one.
that used to be all the time for me.
Yeah?
Yeah. For over the last few years, I've just been focusing on like developing the positive voices and listening to them, and still like acknowledging the negative voices, but also countering with all the positive.
Mm.
And so my positive voices have grown stronger, and the negative are still there to like keep me in check, and like I can realize where I'm actually at and see situations from multiple angles. But I'm definitely trying to like develop the positive voices
Mhm.
and develop like self-love and all that stuff.
Yeah, well, we get caught up in the idea sometimes that, especially in the journey of like trying to better yourself or heal yourself, like we get sometimes caught up in this idea that we have to eliminate those negative voices like altogether. Like I got to get rid of them. I only want to be positive, but those negative voices are really helpful sometimes, and they're great teachers. And in the Buddhist tradition, they would say like you can't get rid of any of those parts of yourself. Like as
Yeah.
hard as you try, you can't eliminate a part of yourself. It's going to be there, but you're finding this different method to like just turn down the volume on some of the negative ones,
Mhm.
turn up the volume on some of the positive ones, but still use the negative ones when you need them. So what are like some situations that you still find use for some of those negative voices?
When I need to express negative feelings like anger or envy or literally anything, I'll just let it go for a little bit, just to get it all out, and then I'll be like, okay, but now see it from this angle.
Mm.
And I'll bring in a positive voice, and they'll kind of talk to each other a little bit, and they'll acknowledge each other and be like, okay, you're completely valid, but here's my side, and this might be healthier for you in the long run.
Mhm.
And so it kind of changes that way.
So what's your method that you use to increase the positive and decrease the negative?
A lot of journaling.
Journaling.
Every day, yeah.
So what does that look like in a journal to be able to do that?
Ooh. So I'll just like write out all the negative stuff and just be completely honest. Like I won't hold anything back. I won't try to make anything beautiful. And you can do this in prayer too. Prayer is huge. But yeah, I'll write all that out, and they'll be like, okay, this is how I feel, but this is the truth that I know is true, and this is where I would like to go with this. So I'll just like completely validate like all the negative things, and then I'll just say, okay, but this is where we're gonna go, and this is how we're gonna make this positive, and this is how we're gonna learn from this, and turn it into a positive experience.
Nice. Journaling is so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I wish more people did journaling.
Yeah.
I'm just now getting back into it with some dream journaling,
Mm-hmm.
and because I have a tough time like remembering my dreams, but if I can get it down as I'm sort of in that fog of waking up right after I'm sleeping, then it's really helpful because I can just go back to it and check in with myself. You
Yeah.
know?
I need to do that.
Yeah.
It's always been really interesting.
So you said prayer, and you just kind of brushed over that real quick, but
Yeah.
I think that's super important, right? And prayer can look like a lot of different things.
Mhm.
What does that look like for you?
For me, it's just like, well, you can pray anywhere, really, any situation. But if I'm gonna be really, and I'm gonna do it like on purpose, I'm gonna like find myself like a little quiet spot, just somewhere, and then I'll just like pray to God, and I'll just, I don't know, just like sit there and listen. Like I'll give him like anything that's on my heart. I'll just talk to him, and then, I'll just listen. And usually the first thing that I hear is, "You are my child and I love you." And then anytime, like, I'll bring him stuff, and you have to be completely honest, obviously. Like, you can't BS God.
Yeah, you can't
It
lie.
doesn't work.
You can't lie.
And you don't have to, he already knows everything,
Right.
so, Yeah, and then I'll just sit there and like usually I just feel like joy and peace and love, and it'll just wash over me, and it's beautiful. And I mean, not always, obviously. Sometimes it feels like he can't hear you, like he's not there, but that's normal. Like that's just a phase in life. But yeah, I'll just sit and I'll talk and I'll listen, and I don't know. It's kind of like journaling, but also not. And sometimes when you listen, like you hear things you wouldn't expect, but it's always like covered in love, and I don't know. Sometimes it's harsh love, but
yeah. Well, when you say you listen, like, do you hear like another one of those voices?
Yes and no. Sometimes it's like really strong feelings, and I know what they mean. Sometimes it is like a voice in the back of my head, not like a voice like I think schizophrenics here, but it's just like you feel the voice and it's kind of there, and like
yeah, so it's not really like someone talking to you necessarily,
right.
but you feel some sort of presence and some message that comes through. Like it's almost like there's something in there, like switches on and off. It's like, here, let me fine tune your brain here real quick for positivity. You know, that's interesting. The idea that you know, our higher power or God or the universe or whatever you believe in, that it speaks to us, or that we can actually have a conversation with that thing, is really cool. And what I like to take it even one step further, and this may be controversial to some of the listeners out there, but this is based in my own Buddhist belief system, but that that voice of our higher power is a part of us too, you know. And so Buddhists believe that this sounds egocentric and arrogant when you say it, but hopefully I can unpack it in a way that deflates that a little bit. But they say you are God, right? I am God, right? That's what they would say. Like, but it's not to be taken like in an egotistical way. It's more like we're all aspects of that higher power, that it resides in all of us, right? It's already there. It's a part of us. And if we can only realize that we are one with that higher power already, we're not some separate thing that it acts upon us, right? It is all consuming. It is part of everything, including us. If we can like break down that duality of like, I'm separate from this entity, and instead see it as like, oh, we are all gods here on this planet, I think it makes it a lot easier for us to engage some of that inner healing, some of that inner wisdom that's there, and also see it in other people. Because once I realize that I'm God, well, right away the very next thought is, well, if I'm God, then you're God too, you know. And that's where people, I think, get stuck, is when I say, you know, oh, well, I'm God, then they're like, you are such an egotistical asshole. Like, who do you think you are thinking you're God? But the very next thought is, yeah, but so are you. You know, like, you have so much more power than you think you do. And I don't think we give ourselves enough credit. And that's why I think prayer is so powerful, because we tap into that. Yeah. What do you think about that idea? Like, when I throw that out, because you come from a different spiritual background than I do. So when I say that, like, I am God or you are God, like, how does that sit with you?
I mean, it's really interesting. It's not what I believe. I come from a Christian background, and what we believe is that there's God and then there's humans, but then that God sent his son to die for us so that we can have a relationship with God, and so that we can, like, I guess, be saved, and actually spend eternity with him instead of without him, because heaven is just God's presence with us, and hell is just separation from God. Like, that's how we see it. And maybe there are places, maybe they're not, I really don't know. But what we have is that when we accept Jesus' sacrifice, we get the Holy Spirit, which is literally just God's presence within us. And so God is always with us in a sense. And that, you know, that forgives all our sins, and it makes us holy. It makes us like God, but it doesn't make us God. And because, so sin is basically what separates us from God. So when that's all forgiven, that is how we can have a relationship with God and be more like him and end up spending eternity with him. So that's what we believe. And like, we become his family in a sense. And it's like we become inheritance with Jesus, like brothers and sisters together. So when I see you, I'm like, oh, I'm a child of God, and you're a child of God. So, you know, I should love you like God loves me, and like He loves you.
It's still, I mean, we use different words and different, like, archetypal structures to explain it, but I'm still sensing like it's all the same thing, right? Like if we're both children of God, then we're siblings, right? We're on the same level. I should treat you as if I treat myself. Hopefully I'm treating myself well, you know?
Yeah.
But when I was talking about it before, like I am God, I mean, I don't have like the power, well maybe I do have the power to levitate or something, but I just haven't remembered how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we're in physical bodies, they're limited, you know?
Yeah. Well, limited based on what we believe.
Right.
Our physical bodies are. Right? And that's part of that inner voice that tells you to keep going, do 5 more, right? Because your mind, it's like a governor on a car where, like, if you floor it the whole time, there's, like, this mechanism in a car that will prevent you from going too fast. But you can remove that governor, and then it will just keep going faster and faster until the engine blows up. So the mind is sort of like, it has this governor mechanism in it where if you push it and push it and push it, your mind will kick in and say, the body can't take anymore, you need to slow down or you need to stop. But you can overpower that mechanism and say, no, I'm going to do 5 more, you know. And I know one of your favorite people, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he was famous for saying like that's how he got so big, that's how he achieved his goals, was he would always push past, in his weightlifting, he would always push past that mental block that comes to all of us that says, okay, that's enough, like that's enough for today. He'd say, no, I'm going to do just 1 more in this set, just 1 more. And I think that's such a powerful skill to have. I don't know if everybody has that ability to push through, but I do think it is trainable for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so this idea of heaven and earth is an interesting one, because in Christian belief system, and you said you don't know if it's a separate place or not, but most people that I talk to from your faith sort of have this idea that, you know, when you die, you go to a different place, and that is either heaven or hell based on your actions during your life, which is very similar to like Buddhist karma. So it's sort of like this ledger where you have goods and bad things.
Well, the thing about that is like, that's kind of how the Catholics have been teaching it. So it's really not about what you do. Like, whether or not you're saved depends on whether or not you accepted the sacrifice. And whether or not, you know, you accepted the Holy Spirit in you. That's what cleanses you. Like, whether or not you sin after that, like, whether you do good or bad things, like, that doesn't matter. What matters is whether you're covered with the sacrifice. So that's a huge misconception that a lot of people have about Christianity. It's literally not, like, you don't have to work for it, but being a good person, obviously, like, you want to do that because you are saved. Like when you take on Christ, like, you kind of become a new person, and so you don't want to sin anymore. So yeah, that's one thing I just wanted to clear up real quick.
I want to ask you about a loophole that just popped in my head.
Yeah.
Right? So say you live a life of murder and abusing people and just being really nasty, and then at the very last day of your life you accept that sacrifice. Does that mean that all that trauma and pain and suffering you caused in the world before that is forgiven in that moment?
I mean, technically, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, if you genuinely change and you genuinely repent and you genuinely accept God and, like, want to change, then yes.
Can you do it over and over? Like,
I mean,
like if you accept God and then, or the Holy Spirit, and then you go on and you make some mistakes and you accidentally sin or something like that, can you, like, go back and do it again? And
well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what we do all the time anyway. Like, nobody's perfect, nobody's gonna stop sinning.
Sure.
But there is a difference between, like, trying to live the way God wants us to and, like, occasionally sinning versus living in sin and being a sinful person. That is basically what the difference is.
That's a huge difference, because I was just thinking, like, holy shit, like, I'm a terrible person. Like, I sin all the time.
I mean, I did too.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I did when Chris and I had problems. I was just like, I was almost trying to reject God at that point and just trying not to listen to him, just trying to like get him out of my life, even though I knew that wasn't the right thing to do, just because I didn't want to face what I was doing, and I didn't want to change, I didn't want to get better. And then a few years later, now I'm kind of like rebuilding my relationship with God, like repenting, saying I'm sorry, and just like healing from all of that. But I mean, yeah, it happens to everyone.
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect.
So I wanna ask you this question because I noticed a huge difference between when I was not on the spiritual path versus when I was, and just a huge difference in what my life was like, the quality of my thoughts, what my relationships were like. So I'm curious for you too, like, because it seems like it's fairly recent that you've gone through that cycle, like at least within the last few years or something.
Yeah, very recent.
So what was it like for you, or maybe you could describe for the audience, like what is it like when you're not following a path to sort of foster that connection between you and your higher power versus when you are actively pursuing that path?
I mean, for me, it was terrible, honestly. It felt like torture. A lot of it was because, like, of the things that I was doing at the time was just, I don't know, it was just hurtful to everyone around me, to myself, to Chris. But yeah, just that separation from God, I felt like I was constantly, like, walking in, like, darkness. Like, I wasn't being honest with myself, and that was probably what hurt the most. Just not being able to be honest, trying to feed myself to lies, trying to believe them, trying to justify my actions and my thoughts. And everything just felt murky and wrong, and just, it was terrible. I had all these negative thoughts all the time. I've had anxiety, I was depressed, I literally felt like torture. I would be walking down the street and I'd be like, I can't take this anymore. Like, I understand why people are suicidal. Like, I never got suicidal myself, but I got to the point where, like, I understood why people would take their own life.
Yeah. No, I connect so much with what you're describing, because for most of my life, at least up until, like, my mid-20s, when I found Buddhism, I was this strong atheist, right? I was not okay with, like, organized religion and what they would do to people. To me it seemed like it was brainwashing, but all the while I'm feeling this deep emptiness, emptiness, depression, loneliness, disconnection from myself and from, like, everybody around me. And I just felt like, I thought a lot, like, what is the point? What's the point of all this, And I had all those thoughts. I think those are normal thoughts to have, but they don't feel good.
Yeah, they almost feel like poison.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It feels like you have, like, this toxin running through your veins, and it's not, I don't know. I reached a point in my alcoholism in my 20s where I was suicidal a few times, and I never want to forget the memory of myself sitting in a bathtub in my apartment by myself, having just texted my family and my brother and other friends and saying goodbye over the phone in that way, and then sitting there in the bathtub trying to slit my wrists and feeling that was the deepest, loneliest, disconnected feeling I've ever felt. And I was just like, I can't keep going on feeling this way. Anything has got to be better than this. And luckily, in that moment, I didn't have the courage to do it. I did cut my skin a little bit, but I definitely did not even go deep enough to do any damage, and I'm so grateful for that. But I never want to forget that feeling, because I feel like as soon as I forget how bad it can get, then it's easier to slip back into it, right? So every time I'm feeling like a little down on myself or a little depressed or a little disconnected from people, I'll remember that instance and I'll be like, oh wait, I'm heading down this path that could lead there, so I need to do something real quick to get me back. It's so powerful. One thing you reminded me of, when I have big problems in my life that seem overwhelming, I like to tell myself, how does it go? It goes something like, biggest problem that I have is like minuscule to my higher power, right? Like my biggest problem is not even close to as big as the power of God or the universe or whatever, right? So I remind myself of that, and I'm like, oh shit, like I gotta remember that power. Like that power is way bigger than any problem that I have. Yeah, and then it I don't know, it opens me up to let it back in.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
We have a lot of kids' songs around that idea. And just growing up, there were a lot of songs in the church. It's like, God is bigger than da-da-da-da. It's great.
Yeah, God is bigger than your problems. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, and it's just a phase, too. It's going to pass eventually.
Yeah, that's another parallel, right? Like, in Buddhism, they say, you know, nothing is permanent. Everything changes. And so the point is to, like, not become attached to any one thing or idea or concept, because it's bound to change with more information, with more experience, things like that. Fascinating. I love to see the parallels between here.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
So something I've been trying to engage in my own life is like the idea that, because in Buddhism, there's like these different realms or different worlds that we all live in, and we live thousands of lives. We're reborn, right? They believe in rebirth, and we're reborn in this karmic wheel of life, and there's I don't remember exactly how many. I think there's 8 different realms. So there's like, you can be born in the animal realm, or the human realm, or the hell realm, or the God realm, where you're literally a god, or the demigod realm, where you're in between human and God, and you help bridge the connection between the two. So there's all these different realms that we're born into, and we spend many lifetimes in each of them based off of your karma and your karmic ledger, right? So in our belief system, we've been to hell many times. We've been to heaven many times. We've been gods, we've been humans, we've been animals, we've been all these things. And I'm starting to play with the idea that that we don't, I mean, maybe we actually go to these places in different times in our existence, but maybe they're all existing at one time. So this idea that we can create heaven on earth for ourselves, or that we can create hell on earth for ourselves, that we can literally be going through life day to day and be feeling like we're literally in hell, right? Or we can have a different attitude or different perspective and go through life feeling like I'm in heaven, even with all this, bullshit with Trump and all this other stuff going on. Like, I'm still in a heaven realm. I can create that for myself. Is it any of that come up for you, like being able to create heaven on earth for yourself on a day-to-day basis?
I mean, heaven on earth is a big idea in Christianity too, and it's basically just like God's presence with us. So like going to God in prayer, or just like having God's spirit in us, or like meeting together with fellow brothers and sisters and like either praying or just like fellowshipping and just spending time together, like that is creating heaven on earth.
So can you have heaven on earth even with, fires burning up the mountains and COVID and people dying on the streets, and can you still create that heaven on earth even when everything around you is saying like this is like the most destructive apocalypse or whatever?
Well, yes. Well, then especially.
Yeah, right. Like because it starts inside of you.
Right.
It's not like
it doesn't rely on outside factors.
That's the important piece, is I think people get stuck on like heaven on earth must mean that the outside has to be perfect right now, but that's not true. Like you can create it, whatever. That's so powerful. I think it's powerful for other people to hear too. Just that's possible, and it's possible for all of us to be able to create that. So I had another question for you in that line of thinking, but it totally slipped my mind, as lots of things do. So I want to ask you a little bit about your upbringing, because, I mean, I know a little bit about you from before you started training with us at Z's Training Gym, plug. But yeah, tell me about your upbringing. I know you were born in Austria, you immigrated to the United States, but I want to know, yeah, what was it like growing up in Austria? I've never been there. I've been to Germany, but what's it like there? How's it different than it is over here?
My goodness, it's so different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, obviously the language is different.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting when you speak different languages, you kind of take on different personalities because each language has a different personality. It's a whole nother topic.
Oh yeah, by the way, do your voices inside of you speak in Austrian, or do they speak in...
They usually speak in English, but sometimes they will switch to German.
Interesting.
Especially when I'm angry.
Nice. Okay.
But yeah, certain times. Yeah, it was just different. Like, the food is different. When I came here, like, I would go to Walmart and have a panic attack because I was like, everything is poison, everything's gonna kill me, I can't eat. So I starved myself for months. So I was like, I can't eat here. Because, like, genetically modified foods in Austria, like, they're illegal. Like, you can't have them. We always lived in an apartment. Like, there just weren't a lot of houses in Vienna. But that was great. I have a brother and a sister, and yeah, that was pretty great. Yeah, we didn't have a car for a long time, so everywhere you go with public transportation. So it takes you 30, 45 minutes to get anywhere.
So you're in a big city.
Yes, I was in a big city. But it was also cool. You can, like, take the public transportation for 15 minutes and be in the inner city, or you can walk for 15 minutes and be in the vineyards. I live, like, just on the edge.
Wow.
Yeah, so our dad used to take us on adventures all the time. He would take us to, like, the chocolate tree. So we'd, like, be hiking for, like, an hour or two, and he'd be like, oh, we're at the chocolate tree. You guys go play over here. And he would hide chocolate in the tree for us to find. So yeah, a lot of stuff like that. Yeah, it was great.
That's one of the coolest things I thought about there. One of the coolest things I thought about Europe when I was there is just how well organized the public transport is. Because there are much fewer cars over there.
Yes.
Probably because there's less space, over there.
Yeah, the roads are more narrow and everything.
But yeah, like the public transportation was really easy for me to navigate even as a foreigner. And we landed in like Amsterdam, and then we traveled throughout Europe, but we took the train system. And you could go to like any country in like half an hour or an hour on a train. It was so cool. Yeah,
my mom and I used to do that, like pay $12 and end up in Hungary in like an hour.
Nice.
Yeah.
So how does that work in Europe where, like, do you have to have a passport you still have to have a passport to travel from country to country, right?
I think you can travel freely through countries.
Wow.
Anywhere in Europe.
I wish it was like that here.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, I don't even really see the point of a passport anymore. You know, we're a global community. We should be able to travel wherever we want, whenever we want, and not have those restrictions. So tell me more about Austria, and what was it like growing up as like a little girl? Like the school systems, and I mean, let's see, this is what in the 90s, probably. So you're not too far removed from like the Berlin Wall and things like that coming down in the 80s. So tell me, what was it like growing up in a culture like that it was just like shifting, just trying to find itself again and reestablishing like this is what we want now? Right.
That's a little bit of a hard question to answer, but I'll do my best.
Well, you were young, so.
Yeah, I was pretty young. Well, up until 7th grade, I was in the Austrian public schools, and it's pretty different the way they do things there. They have 4 years of elementary school, 4 years of middle school, and 4 years of high school. And so after elementary school, they decide whether you're going to go to, there are 3 different tiers of schools. The lower schools, the Hauptschule is like for people who are going to end up in like labor jobs, stuff like that. The middle one is for people who are going to end up in like mid-range jobs. And then the higher school system was for those who were going to go on to college and take like higher paying jobs. And that's what they sent me. And then my brother and my sister, they sent to the lower ones.
So who determines that?
Your teacher. Yeah, at the end of 4 years, when you're only like 12, 13, they decide that for you.
That's kind of messed up. Like, some people don't even come into their own until later.
Exactly.
So, yeah, you're having somebody else, like, choose what your life is going to be like for you.
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
I actually didn't even find this out until a few years ago. I wasn't aware of it growing up. I just didn't worry about it. But yeah, it can definitely be seen as unfair. But if you're in the lower schools, you can work your way up.
Oh, you can?
Mm-hmm.
If you go to a higher school and you do terribly, can they put you back down in lower schools?
I don't think so.
Hmm.
I think you just switch schools. I did terribly, honestly. Like, I was a terrible student, but I was really intelligent. So it was kind of weird. I ended up switching to American International School because my mom worked there. So I was still terrible there, too. It was, like, all diplomats' kids, and they were all, like, super smart and super hardworking, and I was kind of just, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I can do this, but, like, I'm lazy. But, the culture, it's different. People are not as open. Like, nobody's gonna smile on you at the street. Like, maybe if you stand too close, they're gonna, like, look at you mean.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you think that had more to do with it being, like, a big city, or was it like that all over the country?
More in the city.
Yeah.
Like, the farther out you go to, like, farmlands and such, the nicer they were. People were still generally friendly, but everyone was definitely closed off. Like, if you wanted to be friends with someone, you had to be within their group already. Or, like, join their group.
So you can't just, like, be friends with someone you met yesterday at the grocery store or the
No.
bakery. Like, you have to know somebody who knows somebody.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that is so different than how it is here. I mean, the part about not smiling, I think, is something that I've noticed even over here. Like, like, we live in Fort Collins, Colorado, which is a medium-sized city, right? A couple 100,000 people, maybe. And still, you know, people don't smile at me when I smile at them walking down the sidewalk.
Yeah.
But they smile at me more here than if I went to, like, New York City and I tried to just smile at people down the street. Like, if I would smile at someone on the sidewalk, they'd be like, "Oh, fuck you! Like, what's wrong with you?" But, like, I'd be like, "Oh my god! Like, this guy's so mean." So I noticed that too. Like, the more rural you get, people are friendlier in general. Maybe that has something to do with proximity and just so many people and the cultures that differ between those types of areas. But I also, you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like it has something to do also with just the climate in the air at the time. In the 90s, you know, and I don't know my history that well, but you know, in the 70s, you know, from, I don't know, World War II on to, like, the 70s, 80s, like, it was still pretty oppressive culture in a lot of those countries over there, like Russia and Germany and things like that, where there was a lot of social control being forced on people, you know, and you describing the way that they determined which school you go to, like, to me that seems very oppressive. Like, it seems very much like a social control tactic, or even different than like the caste system in India, where you're, like, born into a caste, but still very similar, whereas, like, once you're put into a grouping, it's harder to get out of that, or people will look at you a certain way. Like, if you go to that lower school, like, people from the higher school are going to be looking down on you in some way.
There were a lot of immigrants in the lower schools too. Like, a lot of Serbian and Turkish immigrants. In the last few years, especially, like, even before, like, all the immigrants started coming in the last few years, before that we still had a lot, and it actually changed the culture. A lot of people were actually getting angry because they were like, oh, we need to protect our Austrian cultures because all these immigrants and Serbians and Turks are coming in, and they're changing our culture, they're changing our food, they're changing our language. And people were just getting angry, and it turned political too. And
we're experiencing that right now.
Yeah, in the exactly. US, and, like, it wasn't near as bad as it is here, but it still happens.
So am I totally off base? And I hope I didn't offend you by saying that it seemed oppressive to me. I'm just sharing, like, what.
Oh no, I'm not offended at all.
Yeah, I just want to, because I want to get into what your perspective is on American culture too.
Oh my
but
gosh.
but as American, but as Americans, like, we have our, you know, I don't even know the word, like, nation-centric view on the world, right? Like, we believe we're the best, and we're the freest country, and everyone else is oppressive. And so growing up in this, like, I hear stories of, like, World War II and Hitler, Mussolini and czars in Russia being oppressive to their people. Even we even think of Russia today as very oppressive. And I think a lot of us who don't have the international experience just have this idea in our head that we're the best, we're free, and every other country is stuck in like this form of government, social control, authoritarianism, things like that, and that people are not happy. And I could be totally wrong. Yeah, I mean, but you lived through it, so what is it? Well, I mean, so I'm bringing this up because I have a friend who he's marrying a woman right now from the Ukraine, very close to Russia, and I talked to her about this, and I was like, what was it like growing up over there? And she said, well, it's communist. Like it's super oppressive. We were really poor. Like any money that we made, the government would take it from us. People were getting shot on the street for bad mouthing the government and things like that. And so that's like, she just confirmed this idea in my head that like, oh, all these countries are like that over there. But I know that they can't be like that, right?
Yeah, no, it wasn't like that at all. Like the government treats its people pretty well, actually. Like healthcare is good.
Yeah,
benefits are great, especially maternity leave. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and they have paternity leave too, so the dads can take off. Yes, I want that.
That's amazing. I had something I was gonna say. I don't remember.
That's okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's okay. So, obviously, my perceptions of some of those countries over there is not the way it is, and I think that's important for me to understand. It's all, I'm always trying to learn, like, what is the truth, like what parts of my understanding of things can I strip away, because we all make a lot of assumptions based off of books we've read, movies we've seen, stories we've heard told, and so we all have these ideas of how things are in places that we have never been, and we have no idea how they really are. Right. And so having these conversations to help me tear down those assumptions so that I can get to like the fact of what it's really like. Like, you're painting a very different picture of Austrian Germany for me than what we are led to believe, I guess, in our culture, which I think is a huge negative thing. So
yeah, I mean, growing up in Austria was great. Like Vienna itself was within the top 10 most livable cities in the world.
Nice.
Something like that. So yeah, I don't know where that.
Well, and so let's turn it on its head and do the flip side, right? So, as Americans, right, we have this, and I'm not saying all Americans. There's many more Americans who are much more well-traveled than me, and most of these ideas in my head were present and like established before I actually started traveling the world. And then I started traveling, and I went to like England and Scotland and Amsterdam and Germany and Belgium and France and all these places, and saw that it really wasn't like people were telling me it was. So on the flip side, being from where you're from, like, before we get into like what your ideas about America are now, like, I want to know, like, what was it like as a kid or as a teenager living in Austria? You must have had your own opinions or stories about America and what it was supposed to be like. Like, what did your parents think America was like? What did your teachers teach you about America before you actually experienced it?
Okay. Well, my mom's American,
Oh.
so we ended up visiting every 2 years anyway, but we really only ever went to, like, this small part of Texas where her family was at, so that's all I really got to experience, so I thought it was great.
And Texas is a different kind of America.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's completely different. But yeah, I really just spent time around my family, so I didn't really know what America really was. But I mean, there would be like a lot of articles occasionally in the news just making fun of America, honestly. But we didn't really learn much about it in school. We just learned about our own history and then surrounding countries' histories, but not really much about America at all until I went to the American International School. And I was like, oh, U.S. history exists. Okay, cool. I'm not really interested, but all right, I'll learn it because I have to.
Do you remember what, like, what the news cycles were like on, because like here in America, we will have like international news programs, and we'll hear like little snippets about things going on in other countries, which is probably highly filtered, and I wish we would get like a lot more accurate information, because right now someone's choosing like what they think is important for us to know about these countries.
Right.
But when you're receiving information like on the news or in newspapers or you said like journals about America, like what are some of the things that would be portrayed on there? Are we being portrayed as like a bad country, an evil country, or a foolish country? Or you said it was funny oftentimes.
Oftentimes, yeah, they would like make fun of certain aspects, but in general, I think they tried to be pretty neutral. Especially when like Obama was becoming president, like they were just like updating us about all the news, and sometimes it was like funny and like joking and like I don't know, making fun of them a little bit.
Can you give me an example?
Oh my gosh, it's been so long. I don't know if I can honestly. I don't know.
Okay, no, that's
sorry.
fine. I mean, there's a hell of a lot to laugh about when it comes to our country.
I mean, I can't even imagine what it looks like with like them talking about Trump right now.
Oh, I know. The whole world is laughing at him, and hopefully, and that's another thing too that I think is a problem, is like the generalization, right? So my hope is that even like with George W. Bush Jr. was that? Okay. Yeah, before Obama. So, like, yeah, our president sometimes makes a fool of himself. The current president makes a fool of himself all the time and doesn't seem to care. But it really sucks when all Americans get generalized as like, oh, they're all like Trump. Or something like that,
Right.
So when I went over to Europe the last time, I think it was when George Bush Jr. was in office, and he's this Texan. He doesn't really speak well. He uses words that don't even exist. He just seems really foolish in the way that he acts. And I would like go to France or, especially it was mostly in France that I experienced this, but. French people would look at us with disdain.
Yes.
And when I talked to them, I was like, why are you looking at it? Like, what? We didn't do anything. It's like, you Americans and your Bush politics. And I'm like, whoa, like that dude does not represent all of us, So I think that's a problem, too, is that we can oftentimes generalize a whole culture or a whole country of people based off of like one person's representation of that, which is highly inaccurate.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that people are not doing that too much right now with Trump. I mean, we're not all like him. Aspects of him, though, do sort of run through the blood of Americans as far as like capitalism and things like that. We're really focused on money and possessions and material goods over here, and those are not good things that we're focused on. Not all of us are focused on those things, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand.
So, growing up in Austria, and then tell me about your immigration over here to the United States and that transition.
Well, it started off really good. Because I joined like this little team of like, it was like a crash course missionary course, so I just got to like be involved with the church for a couple of years. So I got to do a lot of healing and growing during that time, so that was really nice. But it was definitely hard just to like, food was obviously a huge issue. I would get homesick all the time. I would constantly be crying. And what was it I was gonna say? Oh no.
That's okay. What are your? I want to know about the food a little bit.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, because you said you went to you went to Walmart when you got here, and you were like having a panic attack.
Like everything's fake.
What do you mean?
Like
Like it's not fresh, it's all in boxes and bags.
And like all the fruit doesn't taste right. Like it all tastes like it was picked way too early and it's like full of preservatives. And it just tastes like pesticides. And then milk, what the heck? I tasted that, I was like, this is not milk. This is not okay. Yeah, it was not good. You don't have good bread here.
That's true.
Yeah, there was just a lot of things that I used to eat. I had to just change up my entire diet. So for months, all I ate was like organic fruits and yogurt. That was it. Because I didn't trust myself to eat anything else.
What about like, aren't pretzels a big thing in like Germany?
In Germany, yeah. It's not so much in Austria.
Not in Austria?
No, it's more like bread, bakeries.
Breads?
Bakeries on every corner.
Yeah, that was one thing in Europe that I loved. And it was kind of inconvenient. You know, when we wanted to like put together a meal for a little group that went, me and my two buddies, we'd have to go to like 6 different stores to get all the ingredients. Like we'd have to go to the bakery and get the bread. Then we'd have to go to the butcher and get the meat. Then we'd have to go to some other store to get, you know, vegetables. And you know, and here in America, you just go to one place and you get it all. Now that has its benefits for convenience, but it also has some really negative aspects too, because the quality is not as good, right? Like when I went to Europe, oh my gosh, the bread in France, like you go to a bakery, it was so good. Just, I think I was running low on money in France, and the bread is so cheap that I just bought like 12 huge French, like long French rolls. I'm like, I'm gonna eat these for the next week because it was so good. So what are some of the, I mean, do you guys have that in Austria too, where you have to go to different places to get?
I mean, they have gotten to the point where a lot of grocery stores will have a bakery and then a deli section that you can like walk up to and like order what you want, but you still have like the individual bakeries that you can go to, and they've got all the treats and stuff. But yeah, sometimes you do have to go to separate stores, but the nice thing is that they're all in walking distance, so we can just walk for like 5 minutes and go to one store, walk for another 5 minutes, you're at the next one.
True. Yeah, you can't do that here.
Nope.
Well, unless you live in a big city, you can't.
Yeah.
Then still, I mean, you still have to maybe take some public transportation to get around. So I'm curious to hear about your perspectives on American culture, because I'm so ingrained in American culture that oftentimes, like, I can see a lot of the things that we do that are terrible or corrupt, or you know, some of our ideals or values are based in, you know, greed and things like that. So I can recognize some of it, but I'm still like here. Like I was raised here. I grew up here. I'm still steeped in it. You were not, and so I'm wondering, like, from your perspective, what is American culture like to you? I'll just open it up with that, and then I have some specific questions.
Okay. I feel like America is like the teenager who thinks they know everything, but don't, because they're one of the youngest countries out there.
Totally.
So they're still going through all these issues that all these other countries have already gone through, but they won't listen to the other countries. I feel like everything they do for short-term benefit without thinking about the long-term repercussions it could have. Yeah.
So very impulsive.
Yes.
And that's a perfect analogy, you know, America as a teenager.
Yeah.
I remember myself as a teenager, my mom trying to tell me, like, you know, I've done this before, I've been through this before. I'm like, fuck you, you don't know me. I know everything, you know, and then I go make my mistake, and, you know.
Yep, you were right.
Yeah. Well, I can only now start to admit some of those things now that I'm an adult. And,
right.
Yeah, but I held on to that for a while. So I view America as, you know, well, so I'm so grateful to be in this social work program that I am, because it's really opening my eyes to a lot of things that happen in America that, you know, I guess I knew about because I was living in it, but I was less aware of these things. So, like the idea of like ethnocentrism, or like I don't know, it seems like there's this. So America's history, right? There's Native Americans here before, and then white folks came over and killed most of them with smallpox, and conquering America, and then after that, America just identified itself as like white.
Right.
Like, we're white America, and anybody who's not white is less than everybody who is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's this ethnocentrism that is part of our history, which is terrible. And through my social work program, I'm learning about things like decolonization, right? Where we're going into different aspects of our society and education and things like that, and sort of trying to pull out and remove all the white influence from it, so that we can get a broader perspective on, what other people's perspectives were on the conquering of America and slavery and stuff. Because history in the U.S. and what we learned in our history books coming through middle school and high school, that was all written by white people for the most part,
Right.
History is written by the victors, and I'm using quotation marks here because we're really losers for what we're doing or what we did. And so this idea of decolonizing things. So how do we identify what the white oppressive influences are in things, identify it, and then kind of take it out of it, so that we can have more respect for indigenous perspectives and colored perspectives, and even women's perspectives and things like that, because we were largely patriarchy for most of our history. So I'm seeing that now in America, that we're ethnocentric. We're extremely focused on race and how that separates us, as opposed to like bringing us together. And I don't see that as much in other countries. I said it before, we think that we're the best at everything, and if we have the best military and we have the best culture, and so what is your perspective on all those things in America in general?
I mean, I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm honestly not entirely sure how to answer that.
Well, speak your truth. I mean, has it seemed oppressive to you in some ways? And when you look around, do you see people acting in ways that they think are normal, but that you're like, whoa, like that is not a very good way to behave or act or talk or things like that?
Well, yeah, I guess you see it all the time, like how white people often treat like colored people, and they can get away with it. Which is absolutely not okay.
It's like there's no consequence almost.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, unless you're called out by another white person, and even then, like, what's gonna happen to you.
Sure. Yeah, and then the jail sentences are less, the punishments are less. Yeah, that's unfortunate for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Black Lives Matter wouldn't be a thing if, all this wasn't going on.
Yeah, and that's not how it is in European countries, right?
We've got, I mean, every country has racism to an extent. But what we've been doing in Vienna is we've been trying to integrate. And even if our culture changes, we are trying to make it change for the better, rather than trying to get rid of all the things we don't like and all the people we don't like. We're trying to accept them and accept their cultures, rather than just trying to focus on like us or the white people or the Austrians, like you're kind of doing here,
Yeah, and it's so hypocritical too, because we were built off of immigrants,
Right.
We're a country of immigrants, and we consider ourselves like a melting pot of culture.
Yeah, like we take all the things that we like we take the foods that we like, we take the languages that we like, but then the people, it's like, now we don't need you anymore. We were just going to take the things from you that we want, and we're going to make you give them to us, but we're actually not going to treat you well because you're not important. We are.
Yeah.
So we're going to take what we want, and you can just fuck off.
So we're going to appropriate your culture and
Exactly.
your food, but we're still going to consider you less of a human because from where you're from or the color of your skin.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a good point. I mean, even early on in my education, in middle school, I heard this term melting pot. We're a melting pot of people and culture. We're so much more diverse than other countries. And I think you're right. Like we pride ourselves on being able to, really integrate or appropriate cultures and make this new thing, right? But we leave out the people, which are the most important piece. I mean, I couldn't believe when I heard, Trump saying, like, we're going to ban all Muslims from the United States or something, right?
That's
like, again,
so messed up.
Yeah, again, it goes back to, like, generalizing an entire culture of people based off of, like, one person or one small group of people. And so now we're just going to get rid of all of them.
Right, even those who have lived here for generations.
Yeah.
And are practically American.
Yeah, or even, immigrants from Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
That too. Even if they immigrated illegally, like, saying, get out of our country, and I can hear the other side screaming at me now, like, we're going to lose our jobs, we're going to lose our culture, but what can you gain by allowing these people in?
Right. A lot of them are doing the jobs that we don't want to.
Exactly. So exactly. So see, that's a perfect example. So, right, yeah, they may take some jobs, but they're taking jobs that a lot of people don't want. And by doing that, they're, in my mind, they're freeing up other people to take jobs that they're actually passionate about, as opposed to, like, some of the jobs that they're not willing to do.
Right.
There was a great show or a movie that came out a few years ago, about, so the premise was, like, one day in America, like, we all wake up and all the colored people are gone, and what that would be like. And
that would be sad.
Oh, it was. But what happened was, like, most of our farms were then, like, there was no one to tend the farms, there was no one to clean the people's houses, there was no one to, like, do all these other jobs, and white people didn't know what to do, because they didn't, they were, at first, they were, like, excited that they had their country back, but then they were like, none of our services work, none of our transportation works, like, we need all these other people in order to make our country run the way it does. But it's not running very well right now, and I think there's a lot we can do to be more inclusive and learn from, like, European countries who've already been through this. I think that's a good place for us to take a break, and we'll be right back. More from Melanie, and we'll get into some more, a little more personal stuff between the two of us, and about some martial arts stuff. So excited! Stick around.
House turn.
Okay, thanks for hanging with us through the break, folks. Melanie and I were talking at the break how we really dug into, in the first segment, the two things that you're never supposed to talk about, religion and politics, but thank you for indulging me with that. I appreciate it.
Anytime.
Those are some of my favorite things to talk about anyway. So in the second half of the show, I really want to start digging into some really, when I say personal aspects of our life, I'm not meaning like I'm going to dig into your personal life, but more like things that are, like, really present for us, things that are really important to us, and we connect on a lot of these things. So right away, I want to dig into talking about martial arts, okay? Because for me, martial arts has been a part of my life since I was 4 years old. I've trained in over a dozen different martial arts, and found my home in Jiu-Jitsu for the last 15 years, and it has literally become my life. Whereas in the beginning it was like just another martial arts that I would practice or train in. Now the philosophies behind Jiu-Jitsu and the things that I learn about myself, they bleed into every aspect of my life. So I want to get into that a little bit, and I want to share with the audience too. Melanie is a blue belt in Jiu-Jitsu, recently just got her blue belt. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's such a huge accomplishment. And for people who don't train in jiu-jitsu, they'll never know what it takes to get to that point, to get a blue belt, right? Mm-hmm. Others will say, I can't tell you how many times, like, I'll be talking to someone, I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. And they'll be like, oh yeah, my daughter, she's a black belt in taekwondo or karate or something. I'm like, yeah, I got my black belt in taekwondo in like 2 years too, but it's taken me 15 years to get to my brown belt. It's a little bit different. It's actually a lot different, a lot more strenuous, a lot more, like the first thing we were talking about, right? Dealing with those different voices in your head. Like jiu-jitsu is a breeding ground for you to deal with and work with all those voices in your head. There's so many times in jiu-jitsu, especially when you're a white belt, where you're thinking, I can't do this anymore, or this hurts too much, or I suck at this thing.
Yeah,
so,
that's the point.
So I want you to talk first about your experience the day you got your blue belt,
okay.
what that was like for you, and if you could describe that for us, and then also maybe go into your road to blue belt and what that was like, because there's a lot of people out there listening to this podcast right now who are in jiu-jitsu and who are white belts, and they look to higher belts for inspiration, for motivation, for modeling on like how to conduct themselves, not just on the mat but off the mat. And I'm hoping you could share a little piece of that. I think it would help a lot of those white belts out there try and understand like what it really takes to get to that blue belt. And just so folks know, I don't know the exact stats, but for every like 10,000 people who start jiu-jitsu, only like 1,000 or 2,000 actually get to blue belt. It has such a high dropout rate because how intense and difficult it is. So talk about that. What was it like for you? First, let's talk about. Let's start with the journey first, and then let's end on a high note with the day that you got your blue belt.
Okay. Well, there was a lot of frustration. I don't know how many times I thought about quitting. It definitely helped that Chris also trains, but.
Now you started right before Chris did, right?
About 3 months before he did.
And what got you in there in the first place?
So I lost the gym that I was regularly weightlifting at, and so I tried a bunch of different kickboxing gyms, and then Zeus was just another one on my list to try. And after a couple weeks of trying it, I was like, oh, I can't afford this. I'm not going to come here anymore. And then Z pulled me aside. He was like, hey, I think you could be really good at this. I want you in my gym. And I'm like, fuck it. All right, let's put this on the credit card. I have no money. Chris is going to be mad at me, but we're going to do it. And then ever since then, I just kept showing up. And I had to force myself to show up every single day, because as soon as I missed a day, I would want to miss more days. And I would want to like just have more time to myself. And yeah, it was really cool to see like when you were getting better, when you're progressing, especially in tournaments and stuff. It just makes you feel really good. But then there are also the times where you feel like you're just getting worse, or you're not progressing at all, especially once COVID hit and we couldn't actually compete, or we couldn't really train. And I just felt like, what am I doing here? I just feel burned out. I don't like being here. I'm not, like, I'm having fun, but I'm not enjoying it. Like, I don't want to do this. But at the same time, like, I always knew I just have to keep showing up. Like, this is a phase. It's gonna end. It's gonna get better. Eventually, I'm gonna realize I am getting better. Yeah, it was hard. When Tom and Patrick got their blue belts, I was like, all right, I'm next. Give me a week or two. And it ended up being like 6 months, because that's not how it works. And so at first, I was just feeling so defeated and so worthless. It's like, I'm totally a blue belt already. Why am I not getting my belt? Like, trying to keep quiet and trying to keep a good attitude. And then a few months later, I was like, well, it doesn't really matter what belt I'm at. Like, I want to do jiu-jitsu. I want to learn. I don't care if I'm a white belt. I don't care if I'm a white belt for the rest of my life. Like, I just want to train and get better, both at jiu-jitsu and as a person. So that's when I stopped caring about when I got my belt. And that's when I started slowly, I guess, becoming a blue belt, starting to take more and more responsibility, grabbing like the new people, trying to be more of a teacher, like within my like allowed boundaries.
Right within your scope.
Yeah, exactly. Without trying to like be more than I am. And yeah, it was frustrating. It was hard. It was depressing, but it was also amazing.
So, what were some of the specific challenges that you faced as a white belt, right? Like as when I was a white belt, many years ago. And that was the first time that I had experienced any sort of major physical injury. My entire athletic career, I mean, I had lots of concussions and things like that, but I had never broken a bone. I'd never torn a ligament, anything like that. And then as a white belt, I had a catastrophic knee failure in a training session, and it required lots of surgeries. I almost died because of the staph infection that I got, and it was really tough, right? Because during that time, all those voices came in, like, why are you doing this? Like, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. You can totally take it easy in life.
Yeah.
But I found that other voice in me that said, you want this. And no matter what, and that's the view I hold now. Like, no matter what you do to me, I'm still gonna do jiu-jitsu, right? Like, if I, knock on wood, if I ever have like a terrible car accident or a motorcycle accident, I lose my legs or anything, like, I'm still gonna do jiu-jitsu. I'm just gonna do it with what I have,
Yeah.
And that's the attitude that I have now. I mean, I get sidelined sometimes with injuries, but I'm learning with grace, like you said at the beginning, like, to take care of myself and focus more on recovery these days than pushing hard. I'm also getting older, so that's more important. But for me, as a white belt, I would experience things like, rolling with higher level belts and just getting smashed over and over and feeling like there's nothing that I can do to this person that is going to put me in an advantage, And when you're put in that situation over and over, you feel helpless, you feel worthless, you feel hopeless. You're having people twice your size sit on your chest and strangle the life out of you, literally, and there's nothing you can do. Well, there's two things you can do. You can walk out that door, or you can stay there and get better and continue to learn. So for all those white belts out there listening right now, like, they want to know, like, Mel, what was it? What are some of those things that you went through? Because I know that they're going through it right now.
Oh my goodness. Oh, when I first started, I was super shy, so it took me a long time to feel comfortable, like, actually being there. Like, I still get nervous just walking up to the door, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to go inside today. And it's been 2 years. So I was constantly scared. I was constantly scared to, like, ask for help. I would never ask people to roll with me. And then, as you said, like, getting smashed constantly and not being able to do anything about it, it sucks. But, like, I would spend hours, like, just crying. Like, I would have to, like, go to the bathroom and cry for a little bit and be like, all right, time to go back, do it again. Because if I don't, like, I'm going to feel like I quit. So I would be, like, on the verge of tears. Z would be yelling at me, like, you're doing this wrong. And I'd be like, I am trying my hardest. And just keep going. There's nothing else you can do. You can quit or you can just keep going. So you choose to keep going. Because as much as it sucks while you're doing it, it would suck more if you quit.
It really would. The regret you have in your mind. You bring up something interesting. So you said, like, you'd be trying your hardest, and Z would say, like, oh, you're doing this thing wrong, right?
Yeah.
I remember that, and now as an instructor, I see that in my students too, that when I make a correction, they take it personally, right? Like when I say, oh, you're doing this wrong, it's interpreted by them as, I'm wrong, I'm bad at this, right? When really, my only intention is to make you better. It's it's because I care about you that I'm making the correction because I want you to be better. But that's not always how it's perceived. It's often, especially as a white belt, perceived as like a personal attack, which can make it really hard.
Yeah, and it's hard not to feel that way, even if you know how your coach is saying it, like what his intentions are. Like, I always knew that Z wanted what was best for me, and he was always just trying to push me to be better, but I'm still frustrated. Like, and that's part of the reason I kept going, was because I trusted my coach, because I knew that he genuinely cared about me. That was one of the biggest things that actually kept me coming back. It's just knowing that you, Joe, and Z, that you genuinely care and you want me to get better. So, and because I respect you guys and I trust you guys so much, of course I'm going to keep showing up.
And that's a really important thing, right? That care. I've trained at so many different jiu-jitsu gyms, and there's a lot of them out there where I didn't feel that level of care, right? You know, I'd go in, I'd train, and I felt like I was just a number.
Yeah.
Like I was just a check for them at the end of the month that they could go cash in. There was no personal level investment. I'd walk in there and no one cared about how my day was. No one asked me about, you know, what's going on in my life. And that's what I love about Z's gym, is the culture there. It really feels like a family.
It really does, yeah.
Like we care about you guys as jiu-jitsu fighters, as jiu-jitsu players. We want you guys to be awesome, and you guys are awesome. But it goes beyond that. You know, me and Z and Joe and Courtney now as a coach, like we care about you as people. You know, we want to see you guys improve your lives outside the gym. We want to see you guys be happy. We want to see you be successful at life. And so when you come in, you know, we're asking, how's your day? Like, oh, you need help moving? Well, let's all get the team together and do that. And we have very cool things that are part of our culture that aren't a part of other gyms. Like every Thursday we go for team dinner.
Yeah.
Right? Great bonding that way. We get together and watch the fights together. We hang out on holidays and, you know, go over to your house and play some VR or something. And one of the coolest things that started happening this summer, since COVID hit and so many people got like invested in personal gardening and stuff, is that Callie and I for sure, and I think Autumn brought some stuff yesterday, but like whatever extra veggies we have from our garden, we bring them to the gym to share. And I was telling Z last night, I'm like, this is what I like to see. Like, this is what a family does. Like, they feed each other. We're a community. And he was just like, yeah, I freaking love this thing. Because, well, he gets free food too.
Right.
But I love that aspect about it, is that we are more than, like, yeah, we're a tight-knit team. But we're more than a team. We're like a family. And I rely on you guys for my emotional well-being much more than I rely on my actual biological family. You know?
Yeah, I have a lot of people at the gym, like Tom, Patrick. I know I can call them up anytime, just to talk, just to hang out, and they would be there for me. Like, they are legitimately just my brothers, and like, I love them like more than I can express. I mean, everyone there, but like, they kind of started around the same time as I did, so I feel kind of like I have a special bond with them in particular. But yeah, it's just amazing. I could also tell like how much Z really cares, because when I was going through my thing with Chris, and I didn't even know him that well at the time, like I was just on the floor crying in front of everyone, and Z was like, hey, let's go take a walk. And I told him what I was going through, and he was like, hey, I wouldn't be telling you this if I didn't care. So you fucked up, you need to get your life together, you need to start treating Chris like he deserves, and I want you to become a better person. And then about a year later, when we were starting to get better, he was like, hey, I can tell that like I wrote him a letter for his birthday. He was like, hey, if what you said in your letter is true, and if like the gym really did save your marriage in a sense, and Z helped with that. He's like, if that's what you say is true, I don't care what you do from now on. I don't care if you get into the fucking UFC. Like, I'm never gonna be as proud as you as I am right now. Like, and I was like, oh my gosh.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we really are a family. Like, we really do care about each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so powerful, you know?
Yeah.
And it's really helpful too, like in that journey, up to blue belt. So you're going through these challenges in your personal life, but on the mat too, trying to find your way as a white belt.
Mm-hmm.
And then you give up the idea of wanting the belt, right? Going back to that Buddhist thing I was talking about before of like attachment, right? You're attached to this idea of like, I'm a blue belt, I deserve this. And that just pushes you further and further away from it. Like, that's how it works in jiu-jitsu. It's like, if you go up and ask your coach, like, hey, when do I get my next stripe? When do I get my belt? And you can be like, every time you say something, it's going to add on 6 months, right? So you just, you better keep your mouth shut and, like, show the coach that it doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
And just do it because you love it. And that's going to make you progress faster. So you're doing all this, you're progressing, and then you reach this point where you're like, I don't even care about the belt. And you let go of that attachment.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you let go of the attachment to that thing starts coming at you much more rapidly.
Yes.
Right? So then it happens. The day happens. Yeah, and you get your blue belt. You still remember the day?
Yes, it was amazing.
So tell me in the audience what that experience is like to go through years of hell in your mind and ups and downs and wanting to quit but not quitting, and then it happens. The thing that you were working for so long happens.
It was just so emotional. It just felt so good because at that point I knew I had earned it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it wasn't too early, it was right on time. And I never felt like I had to doubt it because, I knew. And so it was amazing. I really like going through the gauntlet, like when you take off your gi and they just whip you.
Mm-hmm.
It hurt, but I was just like, this is great. I've been waiting for this. Like, I don't care how much it hurts. This is the best day of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was, I don't know, it was just so rewarding, and it made me feel really proud of myself because when I was younger, there were a lot of things that I started. And right as I was starting to get good, right as it was starting to get hard, that's when I quit.
Mm.
And I've done that over and over again throughout my life. And jiu-jitsu is this one thing where I'm like, I don't care how hard it gets, I am not going to quit. I'm not going to give up on myself. I'm not going to give up on my team. I'm going to keep going. This is the first time in my life where I felt like I really worked for something that I care about, and I stuck with it. And this was my first thing that, like, I genuinely earned, and my first milestone. So that's why it meant so much to me.
And all the torture that you go through to get there.
Mm-hmm. It's all suddenly worth it.
Yeah, and it seems to make everything else in your life that much easier.
Yes.
Like before jiu-jitsu, like I would think like, other things in my life were really challenging, but after jiu-jitsu, like everything else is a breeze compared to what it is. Like people don't understand.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I got slammed on the mat last week and punched in the head now for concussion. I think I can handle this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I can handle that rude person at the grocery store today. That is so awesome. I love to hear that. And I want to give you like a little bit of a warning too. Just based on statistics too, that at the blue belt level, there's still a high dropout rate.
Yes.
Right? And I'm sure you're aware of that. You probably read all sorts of articles on that. But there's a thing called the blue belt blues, where you get to that level and then...
I'm waiting for it.
Yeah, and then you feel like you're plateauing or you're going back down, or all of a sudden there's the white belt that taps you or something like that. It makes you feel like, shit, like, do I even earn this or deserve this belt? And so blue belt also has a really high dropout rate. Not quite as high as white belt, but still pretty high. And I hope that you can hold on to that attitude that you just expressed, like I'm never going to quit this thing, because those are the people that make it through to the next level. And they say once you get to purple belt, more than likely you're going to get to black belt. Purple belt's the midway, but people still drop out. People still drop out at brown belt. People drop out after they get their black belt. It's always looming around the corner, and you almost always have a little bit of that voice in your head of like, I could be doing something else, or I don't have to keep doing this. So my warning for you is just, like watch out for that, because it will come.
Yes.
But that's when you need to, rely on your brothers and sisters at the gym to help you get through it, because the other blue belts there, they're going to go through it too. And you're going to see them struggle with that piece too. They may take long breaks off the mat. And it's up to all of us to, like, call each other and be like, what the hell, dude? Like, I miss you on the mat. Or I need my training partner back. Get your ass on the mat. So I'm glad that you're aware of that.
Yes.
Are you afraid of it a little bit?
Yes, definitely.
What part of it?
Just the part of me, like, I know that part of me likes to quit, or it's just, like, prone to quitting. So on one hand, I'm looking forward to it as a challenge. On the other hand, I'm afraid that, like, if that does happen, am I going to be able to get back into it? I don't know. I at the moment, I do feel more excited for the challenge rather than dreading it. But yeah, I don't know. I'm most afraid of injuries.
Yeah. Because
my shoulder has been messed up for like a year and a half now, and that was what made me want to quit the most. So, what's going to happen if I have worse injuries? Yeah.
So that's another important thing for all those white belts out there that are listening. Like, Jiu-Jitsu is not an easy thing to do. Most people who have done it for any period of time have injuries, my wife has had injuries, and that's been some of the things that's kept her out of the gym too. Is, once you get an injury and you're not used to being injured like that, it fucks with your mind bad, because the other option seems so much easier. Like, I don't have to go back. I don't have to feel this pain if I don't want. Why would I choose that? But you choose it because you love doing it. You love the people, you see the benefits coming out of it as being so much more than the pain that is temporary. The pain and the injury will heal.
Yes.
But if you never come back, like, that may never heal. That regret may stick with you forever. But the injury won't. Well, maybe a little bit will. But yeah, talk about that a little bit as far as injuries, because I know there's even some white belts at our gym who are afraid of injury or have experienced some injuries recently or in the past, and it's sidelined them and made them consider whether they want to get back in or not. I know that with your shoulder injury, you were in that spot for a while, but you would still show up. Even if you couldn't participate, you'd still be there.
Yeah. The hardest part was I was feeling guilty because I couldn't do things, and I still feel that way, just because I feel like there's the expectation, even if there really isn't. I would always be, like, I wouldn't be able to do a lot of things. I wouldn't be able to roll without hurting it more. So anytime I chose to roll, I would get frustrated because it got worse, and anytime I didn't roll, I would be frustrated because I felt like everyone was getting better and I was being left behind. And I understand that you can definitely still continue to grow and get better at jiu-jitsu even without rolling. Like, you can work on your mental aspect. So in a sense, even though as difficult as it was, I feel like my injury was kind of a blessing, because I had to work a lot more on the mental aspect of jiu-jitsu and just improving myself and finding a life outside of jiu-jitsu, because I was starting to become consumed with it a little bit. So I had to start getting back into my art and into reading. And another thing is, whenever I had to roll with people or drill, I would have to be really selective with who I went with. So I would have to go with people I knew could control themselves, and I would also have to engage my mind a lot more. So whenever I was rolling with someone, I'd be like, okay, I can't do this, I can do this, and I would just have to try to be a lot more technical and a lot more careful, which, it forced me to engage my mind more, which was good. So I feel like, in a lot of ways, I improved in ways that I wouldn't have if I hadn't gotten injured.
Yeah, that's a great perspective to see the injury as a blessing. So I think that's a perfect segue for us to jump right into sports psychology.
Yes.
And talk a little bit about that, right? So you you said to me, maybe it was a week or two ago, or maybe you said it to Callie, just how you've enjoyed listening to the podcast, but you wish that I would talk a little bit more about sports psychology because I have a master's degree in it, and you think that it's really valuable.
Yes.
And there's not many people out there talking about it. So I want to open it up to you and have you ask whatever questions you have about sports psychology. I know that before the show, you threw out this phrase, which is, at the core of what sports psychology is all about. You said, it's all in your mind.
Yeah, that's what my PE teacher would always tell us whenever we were running the mile, and she saw someone wanting to quit. She was like, it's literally in your head. Your body can keep moving. Like, your mind gives up before your body does, so just discipline your mind. So I don't know a lot about sports psychology, but it is fascinating to me. So I don't know. Honestly, I'm just really interested. I don't know how to form questions right now because I was not prepared. But I mean, how would you introduce it? Like, what are some of the ways that you try to discipline your mind in that way and to keep yourself going, and to what things do you use for yourself? That's
a great question. So yeah, I mean, I don't ever tell clients or athletes that I work with I don't ever tell them to do anything that I don't do myself. I think that's irresponsible as a professional in that realm. So thank you for asking. What do I do? Well, the first thing I like to do is I have like little mantras or phrases that have really deep meaning for me personally, and I encourage everyone to go out and just explore, or I should say go in and explore those in your mind, like what really gets you going when the chips are down, right? When everything's stacked against you, because everyone has some sense of something in their mind that they can tell themselves to at least get some momentum going forward. So in my teen years and early 20s, I wanted to be a Navy SEAL, and spent a lot of years preparing myself for that training to go into that. And so, I studied them, I studied their mindsets, I studied everything about them that I could find. And they, so my mom married a Navy SEAL. It was her third husband. And he let me into that world a little bit deeper. I went to some of their reunions, I went to some of their bases. I saw that they had mottos. They had statements that they would tell each other, or that were hanging over the door in their gyms that they would engage, that would get them through. So one of the biggest ones, and on my I don't have my keys on me, but I have this dog tag that I had made at West Point when I was in a shooting competition out at West Point, and they made this dog tag for me, and it says, this is a Navy SEAL saying, it says, "The only easy day was yesterday." And to me, that it's just a good reminder that life is gonna be fucking hard, and you need to accept that. And if you're gonna get better, then you need to go into each day with the attitude that I'm going to be better than I was yesterday. Okay? And it needs to be harder than it was yesterday if you're going to get better. So I hold on to phrases like that. The only easy day was yesterday. And I remind myself of that. Or I'll remind myself of things that stepdad of mine told me. So he said that when he was in SEAL training, their instructors would tell them that the body is capable of 10 times more than the mind thinks it is. Right? And then I heard that back then, I'm like, what the fuck was that? What does that mean? And then I picked it apart a little bit, and it's true. The physical body is capable of continuing 10 times longer than the mind does, right? And we were talking about that in the beginning, right? The mind has like this governor that will kick in and be like, this is a good time to quit, or that's far enough. But if you can find a way to talk yourself out of that, or find a workaround, or find a way through that. And I think that's what you're asking, like, how do I do that? But if you can find a way through that, then you can start to tap into some of those potentials that your body already has. Most people have never even experienced anything close to what their full potential is with their body. I haven't even experienced like what my full potential is. I'm still working my way up those levels, but things that I do to get myself through those blockages. So first and foremost, I think training yourself to pay attention to the mind. Okay, so our mind works in so many different ways throughout the day, and most of it is automatic, and most people don't really pay much attention to it. And it's just like, oh yeah, this is a mental phenomena, it comes in, comes out, blah, 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 I'm going to move on to the next thing. And we don't really pay attention to it. So I would say the first skill that anybody should learn, and the one that I engage the most, is just paying more attention. And I developed that through deep breathing, through meditation, just sitting with myself and just listening, right? You were talking about that before the show. And just spending time with the mind, right? Not trying to get to the next thing, but just spending time with what's going on now and paying attention. When you can fine-tune that attention mechanism and you can pay more attention, it's almost like, instead of just looking at a pile of ants, and I'm just going to use this weird metaphor that I'm making up, like instead of just looking at this pile and this ant hill, now that you've trained yourself to pay more attention to it, it's like now you're looking at it through a magnifying glass, and you can see like all the detail in it. You can see the patterns, you can see the relationship between the ants, you can see every little speck of dirt that makes up the ant hill, and everything just becomes so much more fascinating, more curious, right? And that the deeper and deeper you go with your attention, the more you develop it. It's like you get a microscope, then you get a high-powered microscope, then you get like a super telescope to be able to see it. So paying attention is probably the most important piece. And then there comes, once you gain that ability to pay attention, now you can start to branch out a little bit more into the areas of like control, right? So most mental, I'll call it mental chatter going on, seems like it's out of your control, right? Like thoughts just come and they go, and there's not much rhyme or reason to it, but you have the ability to control what you think about. You know, you were talking about that before, like feeding the positive versus feeding the negative thoughts. And once you pay more attention to it, you start to build a relationship to your mind. And then once you have a relationship established and you can strengthen that connection, then you can start to exert a little bit more control over it. So that may look like, so I'm just sitting here thinking, maybe I'm on the mat rolling with Z, and he's just crushing me, and I start to pay attention to my thoughts, and then I'm like, oh shit, like I'm in fear, or I'm in concern, or like, where is my mind? It's not even focused on what I need to do to get out of this move. It's focused on not dying in this moment, or it's focused on something totally not related to jiu-jitsu, right? So then you pay attention, and then you're like, okay, this is not helpful right now. This is, so then I'll ask myself, like, well, what do I need to do to change my situation? And then you start to focus your mind on, like a strategy, like, let's find a way out. And in jiu-jitsu, there's almost always a way out, as long as you can slow your mind down and find it. Same within life, too. You know, if you feel like you're stuck, or if you feel like you're overwhelmed, there is a way out. You're stuck up in your mind, so pull yourself back a little bit and just pay more attention to where your thoughts are. Are they focused on the problem, or are they focused on a solution to the problem? Okay, so then you make a choice, and you say, I'm going to devote my energy towards solution as opposed to devoted to worrying about some problem, right? If you're getting wrecked in jiu-jitsu with someone who's better than you, and you're always focused on what they're doing to you, which is useful to defend yourself, right? But if all your energy is there, then you have no mental energy focused on what you need to do to win that match or to get into an advantageous position. You're just in defense mode all the time. So then you make a conscious choice to say, okay, I'm going to focus now on what's the next thing that I can do in this situation to make it a little bit better, right? So if he's choking me, my first reaction is like, oh fuck, right? And that's a thought that's focused on the problem. So then, and I only have a few seconds before I black out, so this has to be really quick, and the more you train it, the quicker it gets. But my very next thought needs to be, what is one thing that I can do to make this just a little bit easier or a little bit better for me? So he's choking me, I'm like, oh fuck, and then I'm like, okay, if I just tuck my chin, then I'll be able to breathe for like 5 more seconds. So that's the next thing I can do. Then I tuck my chin. Okay, and then my next thought needs to be, what's one more thing that I can do to make my situation better? So then maybe I'll put my hands on his hands so that I can relieve a little bit of the pressure. That'll give me maybe another 5 seconds to breathe. And then my next thought needs to be like, what's the next thing I can do? Okay, well, I can shrimp out a little bit and get some distance from him, which will free up a little bit more space, maybe a little more time. So it's almost like taking the big picture and bringing it down to like, what can I do in the very next moment to make this better for me in my position? Does that make sense?
Yes.
So like if I'm going for a run, okay, and I have bad knees. I've had 9 knee surgeries. It hurts every single step of the way, but I love running, so I do it anyway. My surgeon would hate to hear this. So almost inevitably, I'll reach a point in my run where I'll be like, okay, that's enough, or this hurts really bad, like, why are you doing this? And again, I'll pay attention to that. I'll be like, whoa, what was that thought? Like, this is not in line with my goals of finishing this run. So then I make a conscious choice, like, okay, where do I need to focus my energy? It needs to be focused on solution as opposed to the problem. And then I'll make a choice to divert my thought energy to a thought that's like, just make it to the next stoplight, you know. And then I make it to the stoplight, and then like, okay, just make it to the next stoplight or the next stop sign. Or sometimes it's moment to moment where I'll be like, just 5 more steps, or just the next step. You know, you can do the next step. And by just breaking it down to what is just the next thing I can do to move closer towards that goal that I'm trying to achieve, then those small little accomplishments build up, and they turn into something grand, right? And then I finish my run, and I'm like, holy shit, I couldn't believe that I just finished that thing. Like, I wanted to quit 100 times on that run. So the same thing goes with like life and work and relationships. Focusing on the problem is beneficial because it gives you an idea of the landscape and what you're dealing with, right? You need to know what you're dealing with and have an assessment of what it is. But being solely focused on the problem is to your detriment, because then there's no mental energy going to solution. So once you figure out what the problem is, switch it over to a solution mindset and start working on what's the next thing. So that's how I would say, like, in general, I do it. But it's a skill that's developed over time. Like, I wasn't just born with that ability to do that. It took many years for me to learn to pay attention on the level that I can now. But anybody can start from wherever they're at with just paying attention. And that may look like sitting down and closing your eyes and trying to only focus on your breathing, or what it feels like to breathe. And then, once you've got that down, then just pay attention to your thoughts. Don't try and change them. Don't try and do anything with them, but just notice them. What's going on with them? Don't engage with them, for damn sure, but just pay attention, right? So anybody can do this from wherever they're at. So those are a couple examples of like how I do it, or how I would train an athlete to do it. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, that was good.
Okay. So yeah, this idea of like it's all in your mind, it really is.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it reminds me of a lot of times where I would just try to like disassociate from my body and try to like see myself from the outside. Like if I'm getting to the point where I just want to quit and I don't think I can keep going, I'm like, all right, body, you are going to keep moving. You don't have a choice. You know that you can do this. And just like trying to view the pain from the outside rather than being completely enveloped in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then that way you can stay a little more objective and be like, okay, like this sucks, but I am capable to keep moving, and I can handle this.
Absolutely.
And the more you do it, you can look back and be like, oh, if I could do it that time, I can do it again. Let's go.
Yeah. That's a great way for pain management too,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to take that outside objective point of view. It's actually a specific form of meditation too, to work with the mind, to be able to pull yourself out of. So I think of our mind as like this whirlwind, or like a hurricane of thoughts and visuals and, you know, sensory things coming in, smells and all these things, and it's all just like in a big storm. And most of the time, most people are like stuck in that storm. They're like a plane flying through that storm, like feeling all this turbulence, and they're in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what happens when a plane flies out above any storm? There's like always clear, blue, peaceful sky. It's always there,
Mm-hmm.
right? Storms can't go that high into whatever the atmosphere is. And I'm using like a literal metaphor here, but it's good to visualize it this way. But yeah, so you can literally remove your mind to a higher objective viewpoint or vantage point, and then now you can see the storm happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's going to continue whether you want it to or not, but now you don't have to be taken away and feeling the turbulence caused by the storm. Now you can just see it for what it is, and you can see, you know, you can't do this with like a real hurricane, like, oh, I could stop this storm here, right? Like, that'd be cool, but but with your mind you can see the storm happening, you can see how it's working, you can see the patterns of your thoughts, you can see like why you think the certain ways you do, why those patterns show up. And then by identifying those patterns, you can identify ways to disrupt the pattern or to do it differently, so that if every time Z chokes me, my first thought is, oh fuck, I'm gonna die, right? That's my pattern.
Right.
I can identify that pattern and recognize the trigger for the beginning of those thoughts, which is the choking, right? And then I can identify how my thoughts automatically unfold. And then instead of letting them automatically unfold, I can identify the trigger, so that next time when the trigger comes up, I can form a plan. So I can reassociate. So when this trigger happens, I'm not going to go into my automatic pattern, but instead I'm going to train my mind so that when this trigger happens, I'm going to produce a more productive mindset that is going to get me out of that, right? It's going to help me.
Mm-hmm.
So then you can like retrain yourself for all these triggers in your life, with relationships, with anything. Once you can recognize like the initiating thing and the progress of your thoughts that move forward, you can go back to the beginning and be like, okay, so when this trigger happens, because you can't control the triggers all the time. I mean, you can avoid, but that's not helpful. They're still going to come up. You can identify the trigger and then train yourself into a new pattern of thinking, or a new response to whatever that trigger is.
Yeah, I feel like in Jiu-Jitsu, that's something that a lot of people end up doing automatically, just because the sport forces you into it. Because you're not going to get better if you don't.
Yeah, you have to adapt to it. You have to become more comfortable with the uncomfortable. Because you're forced into it.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Well, you can quit.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
But for us, like, that's not a choice.
Exactly.
That's not a choice that we can live with. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's still a choice, but it's not something that we could live with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sports psychology is fascinating.
It really is.
My favorite thing in sports psychology, the thing that probably got me into it, is the idea of flow states.
Mm-hmm.
So, for anyone who listens to this podcast, they know that I'm huge into altered states of consciousness. And a flow state is an altered state of consciousness that everyone has experience with, whether they recognize it or not. But it's a way to train the mind to be in an altered state that is really beneficial to maximum performance, right? Do you know what I'm talking about when I say a flow
Yeah.
state?
Yeah,
so
no, absolutely.
can you recall like a time that you were in a flow state?
Yes.
What was that?
A lot of times when like I'm sparring,
Mm-hmm.
I'll end up getting in a flow state where everything is just, I don't have to think about what I'm doing, I just do it and I know it's the right thing to do. Or a lot of times where I'm working out and I feel like I can't keep going, and then I choose to keep going, my mind kind of just suddenly switches into that zone, and it's like I could just keep going forever.
Yeah, exactly. So the mind can work for us or against us in any given moment, and we've talked about a lot of the ways that like the mind gets in the way of us doing the things we want to with sports or whatever. So we also talked about like how you can train the mind so that you can engage it, so you can use it or implant your own positive thoughts in any given moment and utilize the tool of the mind to get you through it, right? But at a certain level, the mind starts to get in the way, right? Especially if you're doing something active that requires like moment by moment decision making. If you're thinking too much about a move while you're doing it, the thought itself is slowing down your ability to react.
Yes, that's some things you used to yell at me about every single day.
So get out of your mind?
Yes, every day.
Yeah, and I see it all the time. So yeah, if you're thinking about it, you're slowing your reaction time down, you're slowing everything down because you're too much in your brain. So what the flow state is like you reach a certain point where the thoughts just fade into the background, and they no longer become the focus of your perception or whatever. And now you're just totally in the moment. You're totally focused on what's going on in the moment, action-wise, in your body, and the mind gets out of your way, right? You get out of your own way, and you just flow. That's why they call it flows, because you're not pausing, you're not analyzing, you're not doing all this crap that slows you down, but you are just flowing. You're going with the flow. Analysis has its own place, and especially in life when you're making big decisions, right? You don't want to just jump into something impulsively and do it. You want to weigh out the opportunity cost and like all these things and make an educated decision. But also on the other side, like this is something I'm working on, is it's just trying to be more engaged with the flow of life. Like, bad things are going to come my way. Good things are going to come my way. Like, I have no idea what's going to happen next. Sitting here and trying to plan my entire life out is going to cause me worry and anxiety and depression when I don't achieve those things. But if I just sit back and relax and like let all that crap, all that mental content just go and just stay in the moment of life and let it flow, then it doesn't matter what comes my way, because I know that I'll be flexible. I'll be able to go with the flow rather than being rigid. They say that a rigid tree breaks and snaps with heavy wind, but a flexible tree can bend and sway in the wind. It doesn't snap. So I'm trying to engage more flexibility and more flow in everyday life, which is really hard.
Yes.
Yeah. Especially in a Western world where we're like, we have our planners and our calendars, and we're planning out every moment.
We like our routines.
We totally do.
Yes.
So we could go for a lot longer on sports psychology, and perhaps we will dig into it more in a future podcast. But I do want to spend the last 10 minutes that I have with you and be respectful of your time too. I want to talk about your altered state work or your shadow work that you've been working on. And again, this is something that we could go into for a long time.
Yes.
But maybe you could just give a little, whatever you're comfortable sharing about, give a little synopsis to the audience as far as what you've been working on, how you've been going about it, and how you've been like making really big strides in this area of your life.
Yeah. So I was sexually abused as a child. Pretty much all my childhood, by a cousin. And that kind of messed me up, gave me a lot of trauma. And I've been working on it like throughout my life, really, kind of just on my own. I got as far as I could on my own. And then a few months ago, I had a 5-MeO-DMT experience. First time I ever tried psychedelics.
You went right for the gusto.
Yeah, I went right for it. I was like, well, it's presenting itself. It feels like the right time. Might as well see what I can learn from it. And it was amazing. Like, I did a lot of research. It was pretty much what I expected. But it's different when you actually experience it. Like, experiencing, like, that oneness with everything. Like, not being aware of your body anymore, just going to a completely different place, and all you feel is, like, love and joy and peace and just connection to everything. Like, you're not yourself anymore. You're just one with everything. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. And so coming out of that, the first couple weeks were scary, because I felt like my brain had been altered, and I kept, like, whenever I was trying to sleep, I would keep, like, being brought back to that moment. And yeah, I was scared. I was like, I thought I made a mistake. But once I started, like, acclimating to that and everything started, like, to calm down, I realized it had brought up a lot of the past trauma that I've been wanting to work on but didn't feel like I could. And so it was bringing up all these emotions and all these negative beliefs and thoughts that I've lived with pretty much my entire life. And it brought up again a lot of scary experiences. Like, when I was a kid, I used to feel like there were presences around me, like, that wanted to do me harm, that were malicious, especially at night or in the dark. And I would literally feel paralyzed to where, like, I was scared to move. Whenever I had to go to the bathroom, I would force myself to move, and I was terrified. It's the most scared I've ever felt. And I basically grew up feeling that way all the time, or anytime I was alone. And for the last couple months, I've been feeling that way again. Like, at night, I would just be scared to be alone. And Chris and I we sleep in separate beds, because I have a hard time sleeping because he snores. So we sleep in separate rooms. So whenever I'm alone, like, I would get really terrified and scared, and it was really scary. And then, a couple weeks ago, I had this really weird experience. Before that, I had another experience where, like, I felt that, and I just started praying. I was like, please take this away, I can't do this. But then instead, I felt like that DMT experience washing over me again, and I felt like I wasn't in my body anymore. I was, like, just this thing just moving through the darkness, and, like, I could see different monsters, I could see different, like, things, and I felt like I was just moving through my mind. And I was like, oh, so maybe this isn't, like, a demon or, like, an evil spirit or something that's trying to harm me. Maybe it's just, like, that darkness within me manifesting itself, like, all that trauma that I haven't been able to deal with and I haven't been able to acknowledge or accept. Maybe that's what has been bothering me all this time, and I have to deal with it, but I didn't know how. Mm-hmm. And then a couple weeks ago, right after talking to you, the following morning I woke up, and I felt like a presence entered the room, and it came up behind me, and then suddenly I felt paralyzed where, like, I couldn't move my body. Like, my body was, like, vibrating, and I couldn't move at all, and there was a voice behind me that was like, sleep, 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 and I felt like I was forced to sleep against my will, and I was like, no, I'm gonna fight this. You don't get to put me asleep against my will. So I tried to move my lips, and eventually I was able to be like, help me do this. And slowly I was able to regain, like, motor functions and be able to move again, and then it went away. I was like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what the hell just happened, but alright, like, I wasn't scared or anything. Then I was like, alright, Chris, this happened. So I just texted my husband and was like, I don't know what the hell just happened, but it was weird. And then the rest of the day I realized, I've been feeling a lot of anxiety up until that point, which is just, like, all this repressed emotion. And instead of feeling that, I just felt a lot of, like, all of this negative emotions, all of these feelings, all of these beliefs. They were just bubbling, like, they were just there. And I was like, alright, I just accepted them, I allowed them to exist, I didn't try to repress them. I didn't try to, like...
You didn't try to stop them or anything?
Yeah, I didn't try to stop them. I also didn't try to allow them to consume me, but I allowed them to exist, and I gave them value. And I sat with it the entire day, And then, like, from then on onwards, like, I haven't felt those scary presences. I haven't, like, had to deal with that kind of stuff anymore. So I feel like it was just the right timing. That was just all of that repressed trauma just, like, coming to the surface and me allowing it to exist and not trying to, like, suppress it and act like it's not real, like it's not me, like not wanting to acknowledge it. I finally allowed it to exist and dealt with it. And there's a lot more work to do, but I feel like that was a huge first step.
Yeah. So we call this shadow work.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it like a literal shadow, right? You go outside.
Yes.
A shadow can't exist without you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it also can't exist without a source of light, right? And we can take that in all sorts of different ways.
Right.
So, a shadow is part of you, but it also is brought on or is influenced by, you know, a light source that hits you, or it interacts with you so that it creates, you know, the shadow. So, if we can accept that we have a shadow and acknowledge that we have a shadow side, we all have a shadow side.
Mm-hmm.
But the shadow, all it wants from us is to be acknowledged, like you said. That's all it wants. I mean, it wants to be healed. It wants to be free from whatever pain it is. But before any of that can happen, it needs to be acknowledged. It is crying and pleading with us in whatever way it knows,
Mm-hmm.
which is sometimes only scary ways.
Yes.
Because the shadow is dark, right? So it's pleading with us, like, just pay attention to me. Please, just pay attention to me. That's how we can
Mm-hmm.
start the healing. And if we continue to, like, turn away from it, or say you don't exist, or go away, or something like that, well, then it just has to sit there in loneliness and in the dark, suffering, you know, and that's a part of us. That's
Mm-hmm.
a part of us that's suffering. And we're helping to perpetuate that suffering by denying it, right?
Yes.
So just by turning to the shadow when it comes to you and saying, okay, you're there, I acknowledge you, you're part of me, I value you. Even getting to a point where you can say, I love you, you're loved, you're accepted, you're welcome here. I'm in control. You're not going to hurt me, but you're welcome. Like, imagine if you were, like, trapped in that place as the shadow. That's all you would want to hear, to feel nurtured and comforted.
Yeah, that's actually, like, in a lot of my past, just, like, going into that, or even just meditation, I would, like, come across a little girl,
Mm-hmm.
you know, who was me, and she would just be crying,
Mm-hmm.
and she would just be stuck in that.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like, you know, she deserves healing, but I don't know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally just, like, had this feeling just when you were talking earlier, like, this little girl, again, I can see her right now, and, like, she's not crying anymore, she's hugging me, and I can feel that she feels loved,
Mm-hmm.
and she loves me too, and, like, I feel like, yeah, that just happened because of that recent experience.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's not fully healed, but, like, she's better, and I was finally able to do that for her.
Now she knows she will be healed. That's something that I did exactly the same thing for myself. A lot of my trauma is based in childhood stuff and abandonment and abuse and neglect. And I tried to re-access that by reimagining myself in my worst moment when I was 4, and I was locked out of my hotel room while all the adults were off partying, and my babysitter fell asleep, and my brother was asleep in the hotel room, and I was in this hallway, and it seemed infinite for my 4-year-old body, and there was no one there. I was banging on all sorts of doors down the hallway, and no one would answer. And I felt like I was in hell, and so scary. You know, I was just wailing as this little kid.
Yeah.
And part of my own healing with my shadow is almost like in a meditation, mental projection, projecting my adult self into that hallway
Mm-hmm.
and going up to that little version of myself and and embracing him and saying, it's okay, I'm here for you, like, it'll be okay. And then all of a sudden, like, my adult self was just all of a sudden, like, transmuted and healed because I had just healed myself in the past.
Exactly.
And the Buddhists would say, like, yeah, that's real. Like, you actually did that. Like, past,
absolutely.
present, and future exist simultaneously, and that's how we can time travel. Is you can take your consciousness back to that time and heal old parts of yourself with yourself. You don't need anybody to nurture you. You don't need anybody to heal yourself. You can do it yourself, you know? So I'm so happy for you that you're on that journey. And there's a lot more.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a lifetime.
But that's a big first step.
I've been waiting for this for so long. Yeah.
Well, Mel, I want to thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
I hope to have more conversations with you in the future. We didn't even get to half the stuff on my list of things I wanted to talk about. So
all right, next time.
yeah, I'm going to have you back on. Maybe I'll have you and Chris back on at the same time.
Yeah.
That could be fun too. But yeah, for all of you out there who are struggling with inner traumas or shadow work or self-denial, or you're telling yourself you need to quit at something, I hope that you got something from this podcast today and you can keep pushing forward, because if Mel and I can do it, you can certainly do it. Okay, this has been Conversations with the Mind. Until next time, take care of yourself.
Yay.
Conversations with the Mind podcast is sponsored by mindops.com. You can find us at www.mind-ops.com. We're an eclectic counseling company providing mental health and mental performance services to individuals, small and large groups, teams, businesses, military, through face-to-face sessions or at a distance using phone or confidential video chat apps. We bring a unique Buddhist Western lens and specialize in general psychotherapy for all mental difficulties, sport and performance psychology for performance enhancement, addiction counseling for any maladaptive or destructive habits, and psychedelic integration therapy to make the most from your visionary medicine work. We are available as well for corporate workshops to address the needs of your employees' wellness.